Hello, Eric Eisenhut here for the GK Icon Coaches Panel Discussions. This is episode 16. Today's topic is futsal and the benefits of the game. Today, we are fortunate enough to have with us two very like-minded goalkeeper coaches. One is Ryan Mattson. Ryan is director of goalkeeper coaching, the director of goalkeeping, for Florida Premier FC. Florida Premier FC is also a partner club with our goalkeeper line with GK Icon. And also with us today, we are pleased and very honored to have Mark Litton with us. Coach Litton was, for 11 years, the goalkeeper coach for the United States football national team. He's appeared in 2 CONCACAF championships, 1 World Cup. He's currently the assistant and goalkeeper coach for the St. Louis Ambush of the Major Arena Soccer League. And Mark's had stints in all levels of the game here in the United States, from the amateur game to the college level, professional level, and obviously with futsal. Fellas, welcome.
Glad to be here.
Thank you. It's good to be here as well.
Well, Mark, we're going to jump right in. I'm going to point the first question at you, if I may. Let's talk about the game. What separates or distinguishes a goalkeeper who has, say, futsal background to someone who just focuses on indoor or the outdoor game?
Well, let's take a 10,000 foot view to start. I would say that futsal and indoor have a lot of similarities, but they're quite a bit different from the outdoor game in several aspects. The outdoor game, we're taught to basically make all of our saves with our hands. It's a very upper body dominated style of game as it relates to making saves, where the indoor game and futsal is really more of a whole body concept. It's more focused on both the hands and the feet and the body for blocking. Outdoor, we're taught we need to catch everything if you can. If not, parry away, make sure you're parrying it away from a dangerous position. Indoor and futsal is pretty much the opposite. It's more about blocking. It's more about getting your position, your body in a position and your body shape to block shots because of the speed of play, the speed of thought, the speed of reaction, and then the speed of decision making is so vastly different indoors and in futsal as it is the outdoor game. You don't have a lot of time to think about catching shots indoors, and in futsal, it's more about blocking. The other thing that differentiates the two, I mentioned the speed of play. Outdoors, we tend to have a little bit more time throughout the course of the game for making decisions. Where indoor in futsal, it's almost reactionary as opposed to having time to think about what I'm going to do. And then lastly, with futsal and indoor, the precision of passing and distribution, especially in futsal, it's a smaller court. It's a fast surface. If you're not accurate with your throws and your passes, it typically ends up in a turnover. Where outdoor, bigger field, a little more time, a little more space. Even if you're not putting the ball on someone's foot, you're typically putting it in a space where they can get to the ball first.
Yeah, I see a lot of benefits to the footwork in particular with the ball at their goalkeeper's feet with the outdoor game. Ryan, how do you see the footwork and when do you see the results of goalkeepers playing in the futsal game when they transfer that to the outdoor game? When do you start to see the benefits to the footwork and the distribution with the feet with Florida Premier?
Well, I mean, I think at any age, almost, the more time that they're playing any kind of indoor futsal specifically, they're going to benefit with their distribution decisions. Certainly in an outdoor situation, you may call for a back pass, show for it, have a heck of a lot more time to receive that into space, maybe check your shoulders, switch out. In indoor, the space is very tight, or in futsal. Even if they pass it back to you, chances are someone's going to be on you pretty quick and force that decision. So I think your first touch is going to improve. Your decision making is going to quicken. And certainly, like Mark said, you have to be more accurate. So, yeah, maybe there's a chance you can always clear it, but, splitting defenders, playing them, where they can make a play on the ball, chest it down, get a touch on the ball. That's going to improve instead of outdoor where you have a lot of time and space. And if you don't see anything, just hit it long.
Yeah. I want to get back to Mark, to you. You talked a lot about blocking in the kind of the description of the futsal goalkeeper. What techniques from a blocking standpoint or from a futsal perspective do you see that's transferable to the outdoor game?
Well, there's a lot of futsal that is taken into the outdoor game, and you're seeing how the modern goalkeeper has kind of changed some of his body shape in those smaller spaces in the outdoor game, typically in breakaway situations or heavy traffic inside the 6 box where you're in close range to the ball. It used to be, coming on breakaways in a wide barrier, sliding out, hands first to the ball. There are a lot of goalkeepers throughout the world now, outdoor goalkeepers, who are incorporating futsal-style blocking techniques, either the K-save or what we call block save, or the split save, because one of the big components now with those types of techniques, you make yourself bigger and taller at the same time. Wide barrier, you're wide when you're going hands to the ball, but you're very compressed and you're not covering as much space this way as opposed to this way, where that blocking technique with hands out, the K save or the split save, you're covering more space, but your hips are actually, and your gravity is still centered over your hips. So the recovery is a lot faster. You're able to pop back up for that second ball, that potential second ball, where when you commit to the ground in the old way of doing it with hands to the ball, and if you don't get your hands on the ball or be able to block the ball, you're typically out of the play. It's a little bit longer recovery, where the split save, block save now, especially incorporating that component into the outdoor game, really gives you a second chance with your recovery. I use the word recovery a lot now when I train goalkeepers, because the way the game has changed and the speed of the game, not only indoors, futsal, and outdoor, all components of the game have sped up. We're more athletic, we're faster, we're stronger. The type of ball that they're using now isn't true with the flight of the ball anymore. It's coming at you with more pace, it's waving in the air. So one of the mental components, I say, is you have to have courage, because you have to understand indoors specifically, you're playing in a lot of small spaces, harder shots, less time to react, and you have to have courage to step in, to cut that angle, set your body, lean into the shot. I always say nose over your toes, so that you're getting your heels up and your shoulders and your arms forward, knowing that they're going to probably drive that ball into your body. It's less about the hands. It's more about keeping the eyes focused, the body solid, good body shape, and blocking. That is the key component between futsal, indoor soccer, to take back outdoors.
What you mentioned nose over toes, and I love that. I'm going to use that, by the way.
Yeah.
But at that same time, when I see kids in particular, when they transfer from playing futsal, and then that it ends in Western PA, that ends in March, and then they go outdoors, I see a lot of kids making these kick saves, but they always end up going backwards, and they end up landing on their back. And not only is there a rebound, but now you mentioned the recovery component. I want to get into that in a moment. But how do you teach a kid to be brave? How do you teach a kid to stay forward and put the nose down and go forward as opposed to leaning back? Because when they're so close in futsal, I see that all the time, and it's a hard habit to get them into.
I'm going to tell you a quick story. Danny Waltman, who plays for the Tacoma Stars, prominent, long career indoor all-star goalkeeper. And Danny was my national team goalkeeper for 2 of the 3 cycles that I went through. And when I first started working with him, what I call it is he had that flinch factor. That's where that comes from. The flinch factor is when you fade away from the ball. You're flinching, and you're just naturally, you're separating your body away from the ball. That flinch factor, and what it does is it puts your heels back, it puts your shoulders back, and your momentum now is drifting away from the shot instead of into the shot. And that's where you see a lot of younger kids who are ending up on their back or on their butt when they're making saves is because they're fading out of the shot. Danny had a little bit of a flinch factor, and I did an exercise with him, and he responded very well. Is I had him set his feet, set his arms out, nose over his toes to get his heels up and leaning in, and I gradually just started serving balls out of my hands into his body, various parts of his body. He could move his arms, but he had to let the ball hit him. He had to keep his eyes on the ball. And gradually I went from serving out of the hands to just hitting soft volleys at him, to eventually I went from soft volleys to medium volleys to eventually just hammering balls at him. And it corrected the mentality in his head where now he was staying solid. He was leaning into those shots. He was letting them hit his body. The biggest part, I mentioned courage. The opposite of courage is fear. And that's what happens to a lot of younger goalkeepers is they are full of fear because at one point, and this is no fault of a coach, but they could have been in a situation where they might have got into a position where they took a hard shot, their technique maybe wasn't right, and it hurt, and it hurt a lot. And that right there, our own personal safety guard with pain is that flinch factor. We pull away from anything that we think may cause pain. So trying to get the flinch factor, and I've done this with younger kids too, to let them become more friendly with the ball, to let them know the ball's not their enemy. You know, and pain is temporary, pride is forever. At times there is going to be a little pain involved, but the adrenaline of when you make a huge save will drown out the pain immediately. So getting rid of that flinch is really having coaches focus on them, getting their nose over their toes, leaning into shots, but it has to be a gradual progression to get them comfortable and almost train their brain so that they realize that, you know, the ball really isn't that bad. If they can eliminate the flinch and get that courage over fear, they're going to be able to stand up in games and make great saves.
Yeah, I mean, the fear factor to me, I mean, that's an innate thing, right? Your brain is programmed to defend itself. And that's like someone goes to punch in, you kind of, that flinch factor to your point. So you have to almost train the brain to an opposite way of thinking. And that's difficult, especially with younger kids, to your point, after they've experienced something like that. Ryan, what I want to ask you is with these types of saves in the outdoor game, when and where do you see these blocking saves relevant? Because I see a lot of kids almost depending on the block save when they shouldn't be, meaning it's the shot's 8 to 10 yards out, you know, not 3 to 5. You know what I'm going with this? And like, how do you go about teaching when that's the right technique versus your normal set with your hands a little wider?
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe even to tie a little bit of what Mark had said with the fear factor initially is, you know, the traditional sliding in, getting the hands to the ball, that's your protection factor. Everyone feels like if I can get my hands protecting my face or my body. And so when I'm working with the younger kids, it's not something they get from the start of a session to the end of the session. It's a work in progress over a season and maybe even several seasons when it comes to these types of saves. You know, initially, I'm going to start with the traditional sliding into the ball. The hands are to it; they're sliding through the ball through the attacker, because that gets them a little bit brave, just coming up to the attacker and just making a save, and then we can kind of progress that into the standing up into your K block and your split save and whatnot. But I'm careful to teach it at a certain age, because I think with the youngest players, you know, they want to come up and then maybe go into a K, you know, barrier, a K save. And meanwhile, these forwards aren't very, you know, athletic yet. They don't have a lot of control over the ball. At least when you're sliding through, they can go over. And now these kids are just getting into a K barrier and getting trucked. And I think at the academy ages, that U9, U10-ish, it's a little early. And I think they start to understand that from the 11 and 12 and up, you know, and maybe it's just starting with the K barrier, depending if they're close enough and it's a shooting situation and I can truly block, as opposed to almost sliding into the player, but being upright. But more specific to your point with the kick save, I've seen that it's, sometimes taught, which I'm okay with. I think at the more advanced levels, I think, I'm definitely a big proponent of make the save any way that you can. There's no bad saves, only better saves. That's what I always say to the kids. So when it's that snapshot, or even heck, if they saw it from distance and made that kick save, hey, you kept it out, but how can that save be better? I'm a little bit more forgiving when it's that snapshot. But when it's from distance and they're relying on that, it's usually a different technical flaw. They're still moving, they're not into position early, and they're certainly not set, or hey, I stood still, I was in my ball line, but you were flat-footed, you weren't leaning forward, nose over your toes, feet under your shoulders, sometimes I say, because that's going to get you up, and you're less likely to lean back and go into that kick save. So usually it's a different technical flaw, forcing them to do that rather than them just saying, hey, I want to kick everything, unless they happen to be fearful of diving. And then, of course, you got to work on the technique of diving correctly, which, of course, starts with your set position.
It's interesting because a lot of the pros – oh, go ahead, Mark. Sorry.
I was just going to build off of Ryan's comments, in that he made some excellent points. And first, I want everybody to know that Ryan and I go back many, many, many years, and he and I have had long conversations on the phone about different techniques in different parts of the game. So he and I are probably the most connected with how we train keepers out of anyone else that I've ever worked with. But I want to just build off of what Ryan was saying. When these coaches are working with kids, first it's about the how, which is the technical component, how to make the save. And they first have to understand the body mechanics behind it, how they need to come out into a K save or a block save, how they need to come out with hands first. And that needs to be trained and learned, because without knowing the how, you won't know the when and where. When and where is the tactical side of it. The how is the technical side, learning the technique. The when and where is knowing when to apply each of those techniques in the game. The problem we're seeing with young kids, and you brought it up earlier, Eric, about how they're making kick saves when they shouldn't be. Fortunately, those kids are watching the higher level games. They're watching David De Gea, and they're watching Manuel Neuer and Joe Hart, and they're seeing them using these techniques, and they think, wow, that's fantastic. That's a great save. I'm going to do that. Well, they don't know the when and where yet. And that comes with experience, and that comes with learning the game and understanding game situations, reading the game, learning better anticipation skills. But a good coach like Ryan is going to teach the how first, because then when the what or the when and where comes into the game, they're going to be better prepared to make those saves.
It's interesting. That's exactly what I was going to get into, the De Geas of the world. He'll make a routine futsal kick save where in that environment, it's right on that distance where could he have gotten down with his hands, or is that kick save? And you just have to go with your instincts at that point. And to then, like Ryan said, every save is a good save, but how can it be better? I think that, I love video analysis. I love getting into that. It's not going to happen at the academy level, but at the same time, I think that taking a step back after a save like that and teaching that kid, hey, here's when and where you'll look to do that, I think resonates true and quickly too. And I think that's important from a goalkeeper coaching perspective for those that are coaching that.
And Eric, I just want to add one last thing.
Yes, please.
This is a big part of everything that we're talking about today. And Ryan is great at this as well. He is very efficient at teaching the techniques of various components of the game. What I've always said is that as these younger goalkeepers are developing their technique and their style, you have to do so many things in a repetitive manner, because you have to take a conscious action, which is thinking about what I have to do with my hands or my feet, and turn it into a subconscious reaction. That's David De Gea. He doesn't have to think about what he's going to do. He just has trained it so many times that he just knows as soon as that ball comes off of somebody's foot, his brain cells are firing, his synapses are going, and he knows exactly what he needs to do with his body in that moment to make that save. He doesn't think, he just reacts. That subconscious reaction as opposed to conscious action is what a lot of kids are doing while they're learning their trade, because they still have to think about what they need to do with their body. And that's where the mistakes come in. That's where the slow progress can come from. But once they get the hang of things, I've seen it, Ryan, with your own son. Once they do things long enough and repetitive enough, it then becomes that second nature, that reaction mode.
Yeah, and it's funny because I see a lot of kids when they do transition from futsal to outdoors, you know, they rely on what they've been doing for the past 6 months. So they've been doing that for so long. Now they're trying to do it outdoor, and they haven't figured out the when and the where and the why. And I think that is the to the point, the repetition that's needed over and over again, or when and the where. Excuse me, I think I said that wrong. The other piece I want to get into too is the recovery component. Mark, we spoke last week about this, in particular breakaways, and you talked to me about the futsal technique, the K-save in that breakaway moment, but you also really talked about the most important piece to me is any breakaway is rare that you come up with that ball. You make the save, but there's a rebound somewhere. Let's speak to the recovery component and the advantages to that save versus what we talked about earlier, going out with a 50-50 with your hands. If you could elaborate on that, please.
Sure. And I'm not here to say that the components or the techniques of the game need to be changed, everything to futsal. All I'm saying is futsal is adding to what these goalkeepers are already learning, because they're still the how. How am I going to make this save? There are, as we talked about, Eric, there's 3 points on a breakaway. There's the before, there's the during, and there's the after. So before the shot's even taken, say that forward's coming in, I'm holding my ground, he takes a touch too far out in front of himself, or she. Ryan, you probably see this a lot at the younger age groups because they're not developed enough yet to keep good control. They're in a bit of a panic mode. There's a lot of pressure. They typically push the ball too far. That's a perfect time to go hands first to the ball, make your save. Sometimes the ball's pushed out so far in front of the forward that I don't even have to leave my feet. I can just come up, scoop the ball up, step out of the way of the coming forward, and now I've controlled the situation. That's the before. The most critical now is the during, meeting that player 50-50 where you're both going to get to the ball at the same time, where I'm going to make a save right off of his foot. And that at times is a situation where we're not catching the ball. That's where we're giving up rebounds. And I may come out in that wide barrier on my side and get there and block that shot. But as we talked about, there's that second ball now. You don't know where that second ball is going to go. And yes, that component it's great and is still functional for making that first save. But the missing component of being on your side like that is the recovery piece. Now you're seeing more keepers coming out, closing that ground, and either staying on their feet in that K save position, or they're coming out sliding in a split save in a wide position, and they're still making the save on that 50-50, but their body with their gravity and their shoulders and everything, their hips still aligned, they're able to pop up out of that position back onto their feet a lot faster than if I'm prone on my side. I'm also still in that same angle that I just cut, and I'm in a better position now to make that second save. It's critical in indoor and futsal because I talked about the Spanish hip turn as well, because there's times where I sprawl myself out to make a save where I may not parry that ball. I may just get enough on my body on the ball to block it, my first save, but now I'm going to be sliding, and a lot of keepers would wait till they stopped. They'd come all the way back up and try to recover from there. You see a lot of Spanish, they call it the Spanish hip turn because it was a lot of the Spanish or Latin American goalkeepers that had really started using it. It's more letting your momentum, the weight of your lower body swing in front, and you actually pivot on that hip while your momentum is still carrying you either left or right. one hand down, 1 foot down, and you pop right back up. That's the recovery from a wide save going parallel to the goal. But then the split save and the block save coming out, again, because of the way your hips are still and your gravity's aligned, it's easier to pop back up. It's something that I try to teach at the youngest level, because there's a lot of goalkeeper coaches who think they're doing the right thing, but they're actually doing a disservice. And I'm going to just go a little bit outside of the line of what we're talking about. When I'm working with my keepers in front of the goal, anytime they block a shot, they have to recover and make that second save, even with no pressure. They have to get used to it into a training environment. Otherwise, they won't take it in the game. The same with crosses. And this is the same components. In a training environment where I'm serving crosses and they have no pressure and we're just working on their technique, I still want them making the proper call. I still want them calling for the ball, either for keeper, or I want them calling it away. Even though there's no pressure at all, you still want them to develop habits that they're going to take into the game. They always say, you play the way you train. And if you don't train making proper calls, or you don't train making that recovery save on that second ball, you won't have an opportunity to take that into the game. So I kind of expanded out on that a little bit, but the recovery piece is so crucial now to be able to get ready for that second ball, because it goes back to what I said earlier. The speed of the play has changed. The ball has changed. We're seeing more blocking of shots as opposed to securing shots now. And if you don't give yourself an opportunity to recover, the next time you put your hands on the ball is to pick it up out of your own net.
Interesting conclusion to that point. I like that. Ryan, let's go. I want to speak to you mentioned the fear factor and the pain factor a little earlier, but I believe Mark may have. Let's speak to that from a training environment at the youngest ages. When speaking to this save, they just made that block save. Now you're asking them in that moment of ouch and to now immediately recover and get back up for that second save. What's your philosophy on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be a gradual thing. Mark talked about the instance of, just kind of lightly tossing a ball at a player and letting it hit them. And it's kind of that concept. And maybe even it's something as simple as bringing in a lighter ball, you know what I mean, that you can really smash against them so they're getting the body position right. They're using the technique correctly. But it doesn't hurt as much. I mean, obviously you're going to have to get in to using the ball that they actually use. As a coach, you're going to have to just kind of maybe ratchet it up as far as how hard you're going to hit it. But you can also train that, almost in stages too. They're going to make an initial save, but maybe there's a second ball already in place that they have to recover to and make that second save. And then you can kind of ratchet it up to where, all right, I'm hitting it, and now whatever happens, happens. So, with the younger age groups, it's again, work in progress. You always have to work in stages. You got to make sure the technique is right. When I talk to the kids, and sometimes I got to, calm the words down, but I get into really having them understand why we do something. If you do that concisely and over time, it's going to stick better. They're going to self-correct. And I always tell them, I need you to understand why, not only so you know how to make a great save, but so you're safe. And when they understand that there's a safety factor behind teaching some of these techniques, it's not just about making great saves. I think they buy into it a little more.
Mark, would you add anything to that?
Yeah, as I'm sitting here listening to Ryan, I think about the two of us and the directions our careers have gone in. And Ryan is your classic teacher. He's teaching the technique. And I love how he puts it through stages. And it's like you can't graduate to second grade if you don't finish first grade. So he goes through all the proper stages to make sure that the techniques are learned properly. But it's building confidence. Confidence and courage go hand in hand. Fear, that is its own element. And the more we can get keepers to be confident, a quiet goalkeeper is not a confident goalkeeper. A quiet goalkeeper is quiet because they're not confident in their own skills. How can I tell my players in front of me what to do if I'm not confident in what I'm doing. So as Ryan is working with younger kids and building their confidence, that's where some of the leadership is going to come out later in stages, because, hey, I've trained so much. I understand my job as a goalkeeper. I have oodles of confidence. I have no problem now because I'm confident what I'm doing, telling everybody else what they need to be doing. And that's not going to come if you don't eliminate the fear and you just gradually build them through their stages to build the courage and build the confidence.
That's great. Do you use, as Ryan made a point earlier about using lighter balls? I use volleyballs. Ryan, you mentioned that earlier. Mark, do you do anything like that? Anything different outside of the ordinary?
Yes. And the first time when I was in England some years ago with the national team, Tony Elliott is a really good friend of mine, and he was the goalkeeper coach for the England futsal national team. And it was very rare, but we had already played England, so it didn't make any difference anymore. But they actually invited me in, and I worked with Tony. The 2 trips I made to England, I worked with his goalkeepers with him, and it was enlightening. But for futsal, he used volleyballs a lot, especially with younger kids, because they're basically the same size as a futsal ball. They move when you hit them, but they don't leave that they take the fear a bit out of it, because if you get hit with a futsal ball versus a volleyball, volleyballs don't hurt as much. And what I do outdoors is I mix up the size. I use tennis balls. I use size 1 balls, just so that I'm also training their brain to identify objects as opposed to just thinking about a soccer ball. It sharpens up their vision. It sharpens up their skills. But I think I'm all about using different size balls, different weighted balls to help, especially with younger kids. And Ryan made a great point, is any opportunity you have to continue to train them properly, but take some of the fear out of it, is only going to have positive results.
Yeah, I love that. By the way, Tony Elliott, GK Icon guy.
Yes.
All right. Guys, this was awesome. I really appreciate it. I'm going to give you time to wrap up and also add your twist to the ending here. Anything you want to say, please do. Ryan, if I could start with you, by all means, go right ahead, sir.
Yeah, Mark brought this up earlier, and so many complimentary words from him. I appreciate that. I've been a great mentor my whole career, whether it's playing or coaching, of course. But the whole aspect of not trying to change things, breakaways haven't changed. We still have the 3 scenarios. We still have to come out. We still have to be brave. And there is absolutely a time, and I prefer it actually, and I do teach it at the younger ages. If we can come and slide through and get our hands to the ball, that's always the preference. But, I don't have any statistics, but my eyeball test says that goalkeepers are saving more breakaways these days, because back in the day, you come in and there's a point where you got to go for the ball, and a deft forward is going to just do that little dink or chip, or maybe just somehow slide around you, and you're just there. And as long of a barrier as you try to make, sometimes it's not enough. And so I think adding this extra skill to the goalkeeper's arsenal, taking that from futsal, has made more effective goalkeepers.
Well said. Well said. Mark, I'll let you wrap it up. You have about 5 minutes.
Sure. A couple of points. First and foremost, I just want to emphasize again, my goal is to develop well-rounded goalkeepers. My goal is not to just develop futsal goalkeepers, indoor goalkeepers, outdoor goalkeepers. My goal is to develop well-rounded goalkeepers, soccer goalkeepers. So everything I talked about today is just enhancing. It's not in place of. I think if anything, we add it to our repertoire to make us even better as goalkeepers, because one size does not fit all. And so I just want to preface that first and foremost. The other thing I think that's really important, not only indoor, I started my career, I was not a goalkeeper. I was a field player, and I was a field player for quite a few years before I went into the goal. And one of the things that made me really successful in my goalkeeper career is the fact that I had great feet because I was a field player. I think it is imperative for today's goalkeepers to spend time out on the field. That's the first way they're going to learn to read the game, is to be in those positions on the field. It'll help develop their anticipation skills, because now I think that's what benefited me the most, is that I could watch play develop in front of me, and I knew what was going to happen just based on my own personal experience as a field player. And so that anticipation ability made me a better goalkeeper because it helped me to close things down sooner in the game. So to all the coaches out there, get your keepers out, let them play on the field, let them experiment. I was actually a center back before I became a goalkeeper, and it was just like, hey, I don't have to ever head the ball again. I can just use my hands now. This is awesome. But also, and some coaches may not want to hear this, but to better develop their motor skills and their overall athleticism, let them play other sports too. Brad Friedel, basketball player, tennis player, soccer player, all of your great American goalkeepers, Casey Keller, Timmy Howard, Brad Friedel, Brad Guzan, they've all played multiple sports as they were growing up, which I believe helped them to develop as world-class athletes. So I know, again, some coaches may not be in favor, but let them experiment with other sports as well to help them develop as athletes, not just as soccer players. But in closing, I can't say enough about Ryan. He's been, my partner in crime for a long time, for many years. As coaches, we played together for many years, and he knows I'm that defender in front of him that blocked an awful lot of shots, so he didn't have to do much work. But Eric, this has been great as well, and I also want to thank you. I've watched most of your series that you've done, and they are absolutely awesome. You're doing a great contribution to the game.
That means a lot coming from you. It really does. Thank you. And Ryan and I have become quite friendly over the last 4 or 5 years, and we met at a course, and he speaks incredibly highly of you. He's always talking about his history back in Wisconsin. And, I joke about things with him all the time, and he relays jokes to you as well. So I know where you stand in his eyes, and it's glad to hear it's duplicated with your thoughts back to him. It's soccer community. It's a big world out there, but it's a really small world too. And it's good to see good people in the game. So from me to the two of you, thank you very much for everything that you've done for the game. And I'm looking forward to having both of you back for another episode in the future.
You got it. Thanks, Eric.
Awesome.
GK Union.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Everybody, thank you very much for watching today. Tune into episode 17. Thank you.